We've been in this series, this is our second week. It's a little series of messages, just 3 weeks long, called The Heart of Worship. And it's because many churches do things on Sundays that they call worship services or worship gatherings or worship something. On our sign out front, it said time till next worship event, because we can't figure out what we're going to call it. But here's the thing, we still call it worship something or other. And when you turn on the Christian radio station, if you happen to turn on the Christian radio station, you're going to hear them play music. And when they talk about the music, they're going to talk about it being worship music. And if you have a friend and they go to church and you go to church, you'll sometimes ask them about their church and they'll say, oh, my church is great. The worship is excellent at my church. Or, oh, my church is kind of dry. The worship is a little boring. Or, my church is crazy. The worship is loud and I have to wear earplugs or something like that. And you know what they're talking about. They're talking about that segment at the beginning of the gathering where there's music before the dude gets up and starts talking like I'm doing right now. And so we do this thing and we begin to associate worship with the music. And we're not going to do that anymore. We're trying to address what worship really is, and so we're dealing with the heart of worship. And last week we talked about how the heart of worship begins with a devotion to God's Word. Because if I really believe God is the most important thing in the world and the most important thing in my life, I'm going to pay attention to what He says. And I'm going to want to hear it. Today we're going to move on into another category of worship, something else that's at the heart of worship I want us to know. And it's something that is completely countercultural. It's completely uncomfortable to us. It's completely outside our frame of reference, outside our comfort zone. And I think once we get to it, you'll realize it is outside our comfort zone. In fact, it's my goal that by the end of our time today, you have the sense that you can talk to any one of your friends this week about the church experience you had today, and they will ask you, did you go to church or something like that? And you'll say, yeah, I went to church. It was weird. We had this weird thing going on because it's outside our cultural understanding. It's outside the way we work. In fact, I'm going to start by letting you know a little bit about how I work by way of confession. I have a sin to confess to you. Sometimes I yell at my kids. Sometimes, I'll just tell you how this works. I have an office in my house. There's no room here for me to have an office here. So, we've got this green room that's partially storage, partially conference room, partially something else. It's just a mess. And then we've got all the kids' rooms and stuff. And then we've got this big room. And so there's no real place for me to really use as like an office here. So I maintain an office in my house. Now, the problem with that is that every now and then there are vacation days where my kids don't go to school. And when my kids don't go to school, that means my kids are in the same building as my office. And even though they've got all kinds of things that should keep them busy, for some reason they like to keep each other busy. This is how it works. Okay, so I'm in my office, the door's shut, the walls, I'm surrounded by the walls. They're on the other side of the wall, and I hear something like this. And usually, I maintain my composure through most of it. I need to be the calm, controlled one in this situation, right? So I get up off of my chair, I open the door to my office, and I walk out of the office, and there's something that happens in me. In the 10 feet it takes me to get from the door of my office to the crying child, where the conversation turned into an argument that turned into something, I don't even know what, that ended up with someone crying. And then, of course, there's the report that comes to me once I get there. He did or she did or something along those lines. And there's noise and there's something that happens in me in the 10 feet from the door of my office to the crying child where I realize something. I must gain control of the situation. And the control that I exert in this situation is directly related to the volume of my voice. And so, I let it go. Because I believe that I'm going to lose control if I don't lose my voice. That there's this moment there where all of a sudden I feel like my control depends on my volume. And this is the way the world has taught us to behave. The world has taught us that when you begin to lose control, your response is to use power. When I begin to lose control, my response is to use force, power, something to strengthen me. For some of us, it's raising the volume of our voice. For some of us, it's shifting into a totally different language that our parents never taught us. Or maybe your parents did teach you that language. Or maybe it's your friends, the locker room buddies, or their Navy bros or something. But you shift into a completely different language, and then that language gives you power and enables you to feel stronger. And some of us, it's even physical. But we get to that place where if I'm losing control, I feel like I need to exert power. And the world has taught us that that is the way things work. But when we look at our Savior, when we look at Jesus, we find something that is completely opposite. We find a guy who is on the verge of losing control. The night before he goes to the cross, he is on the verge of losing control. He is in a few minutes going to be kissed by a close friend who is being followed by a troop of soldiers who are going to capture him, carry him away, flog him in the Roman way, 39 lashes with a leather whip embedded with glass and stone that'll tear the flesh off of his body. And he will be hung on a cross with nails running through the most sensitive parts of his body, not because that is a great way to kill people, but that is a great way to not kill people. See, crucifixion doesn't kill people. It's the fact that this guy is up there for so long that he eventually, his muscles begin to give out and he ends up suffocating under the pressure and the weight of his own body. And crucifixion wasn't invented to kill people. It was invented to put them on display until they eventually died. Jesus is just about to go through that. And the only reason he's going through this whole situation is because his father said, listen, I've got a plan. I've got a project, and I need you to do this for me. And so he comes to earth, and on the night before he loses all control, does he feel the need to exert power? Well, this is what he says. In prayer, he says, Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. This cup referring to all the stuff that I'm going to experience tomorrow. All these things that I'm just about to encounter. Take it from me. Yet, not my will, but yours be done. This is an amazing moment of worship. Because if you recall, our definition of worship from last week is simply this. Worship is what happens when I, by words, attitudes, and actions, express God's supreme value. And so Jesus, when he says, not my will, but your will be done, that's worship. That's him saying that above all other things in this world, what you want is more important than what I want. You are of supreme value in this world and to me. And he says those words as an act of worship. It's also expressed later on in the Apostle Paul. In the book of Philippians, we find Paul is in jail and he is a day away from death, or at least he might be. See, at any moment, the Romans could come in and say, okay, this is it. This is the day. You're done. We're going to kill you. He's in jail. He's writing to a church that he founded in a town called Philippi. And he's writing them this letter. In the opening chapter of the letter says, I don't know if I'm going to live tomorrow or not. But he says in chapter 1 this, for me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. He's about ready to lose control of his whole life, and he doesn't even exert any power at all. He just simply says, if I live, it's because of Jesus. And if I die, well, then I win, because I'll be with Jesus. And then in chapter 4, he says this, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. You see, there's a kind of worship that is truly countercultural. It's a worship that goes beyond the things are losing control, I need to gain control. It's a worship that says, my life is out of control, and I'm okay with that. Because I know who is in control. and I've learned the secret of being content. I don't need to exert power because there is one more powerful than I who is ready to exert power of his own. I want to take you to a couple chapters in Psalms, a couple passages in Psalms. The first one is long. It'll take me about 5 minutes to read through the whole thing. It's a long chapter. It's one of my favorite psalms, and it's not a psalm that's arranged in an easy-to-understand fashion. Some of the psalms, for example, if you went to one of the life groups this last week, you might have encountered the Bible study on Psalm 19, where it was very structured. It was very organized. There's an outline you can follow in Psalm 19. There are different stanzas and there are different breaks, and it's very easy to track with them. But in Psalm 37, what you find is something else. You find a whole bunch of themes, 4 themes, in fact, that get intertwined. And each theme keeps showing up over and over and over again. And so I'm just going to read it out loud. And if you have a Bible that you can mark up, mark things that interest you. Or if you have one of these Bibles, electronic things, you can tap on the thing and add colors to it. But I'm just going to read it. It's going to take a little while. I hope that maybe you follow along with me. It's one of my favorite psalms in the Bible. Psalm 37:4 is like a life verse to me. But I want to take you to this psalm because there are 4 themes that speak very clearly to what we're talking about today. David wrote this, and he says, "Do not fret because of those who are evil, or be envious of those who do wrong. For like the grass they will soon wither, like green plants they will soon die away. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and enjoy safe pasture. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust him in this, and he will do this. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like the noonday sun. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes. Refrain from anger and turn from wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evil. For those who are evil will be destroyed, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit the land. A little while and the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. But the meek will inherit the land and enjoy peace and prosperity. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. The wicked draw the sword and bend the bow to bring down the poor and needy, to slay those whose ways are upright, but their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken. Better the little that the righteous have than the wealth of many wicked. For the power of the wicked will be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster they will not wither. In times of famine they will enjoy plenty, but the wicked will perish. Though the Lord's enemies are like the flowers of the field, they will be consumed. They will go up in smoke. The wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous give generously. Those the Lord blesses will inherit the land, but those he curses will be destroyed. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand. I was young and now I'm old, yet I've never seen the righteous forsaken, or their children begging bread. They're always generous and lend freely. Their children will be a blessing. Turn from evil and do good. Then you will dwell in the land forever, for the Lord loves the just and will not forsake his faithful ones. Wrongdoers will be completely destroyed. The offspring of the wicked will perish. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. The mouths of the righteous utter wisdom, and their tongues speak what is just. The law of their God is in their hearts. Their feet do not slip. The wicked lie in wait for the righteous, intent on putting them to death, but the Lord will not leave them in the power of the wicked, or let them be condemned when brought to trial. Hope in the Lord and keep his way. He will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are destroyed, you will see it. I've seen a wicked and ruthless man flourishing like a luxuriant native tree, but he soon passed away and was no more. Though I looked for him, he could not be found. Consider the blameless. Observe the upright. A future awaits those who seek peace, but all sinners will be destroyed. There will be no future for the wicked. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. There are 4 themes that rotate throughout this psalm. And the first theme is one that makes us uncomfortable, I know, but it's simply this: evil sometimes wins. Evil people sometimes win. The very beginning of the psalm says, don't fret when evil people find success. Don't fret when the wicked people find success, because it happens. It's just the way the world works. Evil people sometimes win. Life is pain, Your Highness. Anyone who tells you something differently is selling something. Life isn't fair, your mom told you. Sometimes the bad guys win. Our struggle is that when we come to God, quite often we want to ask the question of why. Why, God? And this psalm doesn't give us an answer for why they succeed, but it tells us what we should do. Next, it says, worry and wrath lead me to evil too. The very beginning of the psalm says, don't fret when this happens, because worry and wrath, it just leads to your own evil too. If I get to that place where I begin to say, God, why are you letting these evil people win? And God, why don't you bless me the way you bless other people? And why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? If I get into that frame of mind, that place, I'm going to try to push into areas where God hasn't opened the door, and that's me doing my own evil. Next, the third theme is that delight and trust in God will not fall flat. Verse 4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Delight and trust in God will not fall flat. And why? The end result is this, the fourth theme, because ultimately God will make everything right. Ultimately God will make everything right. You take these 4 themes together, and we get a picture that yes, bad is in the world. And yes, I shouldn't enter into the same kind of bad. Instead, I should flip it. I should delight and trust in God, because if I do that, I will eventually come out on top, because God eventually wins. But there's something happening here in this verse. See, I want to illustrate this for you. This verse is telling us a sequence of events, okay? God is in charge, okay? The wicked will lose. Even for a time, they might win. They will lose. And those who delight in God will reap the benefits, okay? So God is in charge. The wicked will lose, and those who delight and trust in God will reap the benefits. Very clear. But what happens in between the first 2 stages? See, we're stuck in between stage 1 and 2. God is in charge, yes, but the wicked have not yet been judged. And so we have not yet fully reaped the benefits. The kingdom of God has not come to the earth yet. So what do we do in the in-between time? God is in charge, and now we're here before the wicked have been judged. What do we do? Well, look at verse 7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Flip to the end of that psalm. Verse 39 gives us this great confidence. The salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He's their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. The word refuge is an actively inactive word. It's a word where I have to intentionally choose to do nothing. See, refuge is not a word that you say while you're holding a sword. Refuge is not a word that you say when you're on the front lines. Refuge is the word for when you are holding a shovel because you just finished digging a hole and you're in it. Refuge is the word when you're in the cave in the mountain and the door has just been shut. Refuge is the word that says, I can't win, but I know where it's safe. Be still, he says. It's a countercultural expression of worship for me to just let God be God. And to say, if he hasn't moved yet, no one has to move yet. If he hasn't judged the wicked yet, I don't have to judge the wicked either. If he hasn't exerted his wrath, I don't need to exert my wrath. If God hasn't moved, I don't need to move either. I can be still. In fact, this is the way I would phrase it. I encourage you to write this down. In the midst of a wicked world, we worship God with delight and patient trust. Delight and patient trust. The world around us is crazy, it's wicked, it's bad. There's all kinds of bad stuff that happens. But in the midst of it, I can just let God be God. And I can be still. And there's an attitude in the heart that is precious to God. In fact, I'm going to take you to a couple other Psalms here and just show you how this same concept plays out. Flip over to 46. Psalm 46. It's a little shorter than the one we just read. This one's not by David. It's by a group of guys called the Sons of Korah. But we're actually told this one is a song. It's not just a poem. It's supposed to be sung to the tune of Alamote. And I don't know what Alamote is. I've never heard it. But if I knew it, I would sing it, but I don't know it, so I can't. But it is a song. The Sons of Korah wrote this. And it says this, God is our refuge. There's that word again. And strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. What he's saying here in the first few verses is that it's not just about when the wicked win, it's about the fact that natural disasters are all around us. Even if the mountains were to fall into the sea, even though the sea rages and swirls and twirls and comes on land, even though there's natural disasters all over the place, we're not going to fear. Because God's in charge. Because God's our refuge. And then the next section, it says, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. That just simply is saying that there is nature doing its right thing when God is nearby. The river that leads to the place where God is, that river makes people glad. There's no natural disasters with that river. See, when God's involved, nature does its job right. It does its job well. It brings joy and healing. And it says this, verse 5, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. When God is present, things work. But now check out this next verse. Verse 6, nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. And this is drawing for us the picture of the fact that in the world around us, politicians are in uproar. Kingdoms, nations, there's economic disaster, there's political upheaval, there's all kinds of craziness. And yet God just has to open his mouth and the whole earth melts. So he's not worried so much about, what the politicians are saying. He's not so much worried about what the next election is going to do. Because see, God can just open his mouth and everything around us will just melt. He's kind of powerful that way. The Lord Almighty, here it is, verse 7, is with us. The God who can speak the world into liquid is the God who's with us. The God who makes nature do its job right is the God who's with us. The God who isn't fazed by economies and political systems is with us. The God of Jacob, it says, is our fortress. Verse 8, come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he's brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. Our God is so big and powerful, he can take wars that cover the entire earth and shut them down. Verse 10, so he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. See, if God is that strong, that powerful, that amazing, and if he is with us, what's left to be done? If he's here with me, and he's my fortress, and he's protecting me from all the craziness out there, then do I need to leave his presence to go fight some battle? Do I need to jump out there and get into the war? Do I need to do something, or should I just be still and know he's in charge? And for whatever reason, he has chosen not to act yet, but he's with me. And I can be still. See, there's an attitude of worship that says, if God really is that powerful, then I really don't need to do anything. I can be still in his presence. Let's look at another one. Psalm 131. The psalm is even shorter. David wrote this one too. It's only 3 verses. He says, "My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me." Now, that right there. I concern myself with all kinds of stuff that are too wonderful, all kinds of things that are too wonderful for me. I ask all kinds of questions I can't possibly understand the answers for. How many times have we seen a situation and said, God, why? How many times have we asked God, why do you let that happen? Why do you let the bad stuff happen to the good people? Why do you let the good stuff happen to the bad people? Why do you let this stuff happen? See, God is in charge, I believe that, and the wicked have not yet been judged, so I've got all these questions over here. And the psalmist says, listen, I know this stuff is above my head. If God is really in charge, if he's really supreme, listen, if he created the stuff that we can see, but if he created the stuff that's out there, if he created the stuff that's down here on this earth, if God made all that stuff, if he's that powerful, then there are things about God that I cannot possibly get. I'm not even going to ask. I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm not even going to let it bother me. What he says, verse 2, "But I have calmed and quieted myself. I'm like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content." When I first read this psalm, I was a teenager or something. I went to a Christian school. We read through all the psalms and stuff in different classes. And I read this psalm and I was like, well, I don't get that. I don't know what weaned child is all about. I don't understand that at all. And I'm glad I didn't, because it would have kind of grossed me out thinking about the whole concept. But then I became a dad a few years ago. About 13 years ago, I became a dad. And I learned that there's a whole world of stuff called nursing. And I'm not going to get into any of the other details of that because it still kind of creeps me out. But there are books. There are books that are published. There are consultants that you can speak to that will come to you in the hospital, and the consultant will tell you how to do this nursing thing well and how to not do this nursing thing well and all the instructions. And there's all kinds of stuff that I never expected to encounter. I did not read those books. I avoided them, and I did not speak to the consultant. I just stepped back and I was like, yo, ladies, take care of this stuff. So I had a son, and he was nursed like many children are. And in the process, I began to enter a whole world of learning about things. For example, my wife would talk to other women about their experiences with nursing, and I was in the room. And things like this would happen. And at some points in time, I was at a part of a small group, and my wife wasn't the only one who had a young child. And every now and then, someone in that room would have to cover themselves with a blanket and do the whole nursing thing. And I was like, this is creeping me out. This is weird. And, so anyway, I'm exaggerating a little bit to make this point, that I learned about unweaned children. See, there's a moment in time when a baby is old enough to know what hunger is and old enough to know where the food is, but young enough that the baby still can't feed itself. And it's in that moment when the baby is old enough to know hunger and old enough to know the source of the food that you find a child that is restless. And you find a child that when it's on its mom's lap, its head goes back, its mouth goes open. And that little baby begins to grope with whatever hands it has at the blouse and the shirt of the mom. And it's like, come on, it's time to eat. And I'm like, this is creepy, this is weird, this is crazy. But when the child is weaned, when the child has moved beyond the nursing, and there have been spoons with oatmeal or rice, and there has been an imaginary airplane that has flown it into the mouth, and when the child discovers there's a whole new world of food opportunities and it is weaned from its mother, something magical happens. Before, the mom was a source, and now the mom can become a mom. There's a relationship that is now personal. Whereas before, the unweaned child, the only relationship it has with the mom is, you are blessing me again. And if you're not blessing me again, why am I sitting here on your lap? What's the point here? If I'm going to be here with you, you got to be blessing me. You got to be giving me. You got to be giving me. What have you done for me lately? But the weaned child can just be there on the mom's lap, resting, not even asleep, just aware and there and present. And David says, God, I have for far too long been the kind of person who, when it comes to you, I expect you to just give me one more blessing. And the only time I ever come to you is when I expect something from you. And I need you to feed me once again. I need you to bless me once again. I need you to give me one more thing. God, what have you done for me lately? But David says, no. I'm not going to worry about the stuff that's beyond me. I'm going to be like a weaned child, and I'm just going to be with you. So then he calls his brothers and sisters in Israel to join him. He says, Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. Now, there's one more lesson that I want us to pull out of this stuff. And it's actually in Psalm 130. We just go back just a little bit, because something very interesting happens in Psalm 130. You'll notice in Psalm 130 and Psalm 131, they're both called songs of ascents. Those are the psalms that were written for the express purpose of when a person was making a pilgrimage from somewhere in Israel to Jerusalem. When they were on that pilgrimage, that was called their ascent. Well, because Jerusalem was perceived as the highest place, even though physically it wasn't the highest place. The temple was on a mountain, and so they pictured this idea of they're ascending to the temple. They're going to worship. In other words, just so you know, when you're driving to church next Sunday morning, these are the Psalms for you. They're for the people who are going to the place of worship. Okay, so now let's go to 130. He says this, out of the depths I cry to you, Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for mercy. And here, we begin to realize something that we should have recognized all along. Every one of these Psalms that we've been reading, whether they sound like it or not, is actually a prayer. Because this is a guy pouring out his heart to his Father in heaven. And so this time, he's realizing, this is my prayer. God, hear me. Have mercy on me. If you, Lord, kept a record of sins, Lord, who could stand? But with you there's forgiveness, so that we can, with reverence, serve you. And then he says this, I wait for the Lord. My whole being waits. And in his word, I put my hope. I wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning. More than watchmen wait for the morning. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for with the Lord is unfailing love, and with him is full redemption. He himself will redeem Israel from all their sins. But there's that repeated line in there. More than watchmen wait for the morning. How do you wait for something more than someone else waits for that thing? How do you wait for something more? I mean, is it possible to wait more than other people wait? If you're both waiting for the same, what does that mean? The only thing I could come up with is that when David is talking about waiting, and he's comparing it to the watchmen waiting for the morning, how do watchmen wait for the morning? Well, what they do is called anticipation. See, they've been up all night. They've been on the wall. They've been just waiting until the sun comes up so they can go home. So they can go back, get in bed, have a breakfast, whatever it is. They've been waiting all night long. And so the watchman waiting for the morning is called anticipation. And David says, Lord, I anticipate you with greater eagerness than a watchman anticipates the sunrise. What does that mean for us? I believe what it means is this. David realizes, or whoever wrote this particular psalm realizes, that if God is in charge, and if my responsibility is patience, and my responsibility is to be still, then the only activity I can do is prayer. The only activity I can do is to let God know I'm waiting for Him. To let God know I want Him to move. To let God know I'm ready. Whenever He picks to do it, I'm ready for Him to do it. I'm anticipating, I'm waiting, I'm watching. And so he says it twice, more than watchmen wait for the morning. Lord, I wait for you. I'm waiting for you to move. And so I want to conclude with this thought. At the heart of worship is a prayer that asks God to be God and the patient expectation that He will be. At the heart of worship is a prayer that asks God to be God and the patient expectation that He will be.
Thank you for listening to this message from Lafayette Community Church. We believe that God has a full and fulfilling life in store for you, and we want to help you live it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Pastor Jeff, through the web form at LafayetteCommunityChurch.com. And as always, I encourage you to plug into a solid, God-honoring community wherever you may be. Life is a journey, and no one should ever walk alone.